Philippians 15 through 16. I gave up all of that inferior stuff so I could know Christ personally, experience his resurrection power, be a partner in his suffering, and go all the way with him to death itself. If there was any way to get in on the resurrection from the dead, I wanted to do it.
Good morning. Happy New Year. I'm going to explain to you why my lesson's called BOGO, buy one, get one free. When we left off in Philippians, it was right before Thanksgiving, and we kind of took or at least I did, took a hiatus for the holidays to do some more stuff that seemed more fitting for the season. And we had got to Philippians 3 about midway down. And when you get to 10 through 16 or so, you kind of find that there's 3 sermons there. And, or maybe there's 2.5. I don't know. But what I decided was to split today in a couple of different directions. It's not going to take any longer, I don't think, but it is going to feel like it's 2 different sermons at once, and I'm going to try to ducktail what we talk about at the beginning at the end. I will tell you, at least the first part of this message is not easy for me. It's not going to be easy for you either, I don't think. So I'm going to say it in the most loving way I can, and I want you to know that no one is taking it harder than me. So we're going to start at Philippians 3, and our text today was supposed to be 12 through 16, but you've really got to go back to verse 10 to make sense on what's going on through 12 through 16. So we're going to go back to verse 10 to start with. I want to know Christ. Yes, know him, the power of his resurrection and participation in his sufferings, and become like him in his death, and so somehow attaining the resurrection from the dead. Not that I've already attained this or have already arrived at my goal, but I press on to take hold of that which Christ took hold of me. Brothers and sisters, I do not consider myself yet to have taken hold of it. But one thing I do, forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead, I press on to the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Jesus Christ. All of us, then, who are mature should take such a view of things. And if some point you think differently, that too God will make clear to you. Only let us live up to what we have already attained. Judging from the frequency that Paul uses athletic, we'll say, metaphors in his writings, it seems to me the Apostle Paul may have been a sports fan. He speaks of his desire to be effective in the Christian life. He wrote in 1 Corinthians 9:26, don't run like somebody who's running aimlessly. Do not fight like a boxer who's beating the air. He described the Christian life in Ephesians 6 as a struggle. And the Hebrew word used there is pale, P-A-L-E, which is type of wrestling or a match or a fight. But if you look at Paul's writings, his favorite metaphor that describes the Christian walk or life is a foot race. It's in Acts 20:24, it's in Romans 9, it's in 1 Corinthians 9. And before we broke into holiday mode, we'll say, we were in Philippians 3, 4 through 11. And Paul was describing his transformation when he encountered Jesus on the road to Damascus. And in that powerful, moving message, the apostle recited an impressive list of what we'll call religious credentials. And then he declared that compared to the awesome value of knowing Jesus Christ, those accomplishments were like yesterday's trash. Paul acknowledged his useless human achievements for the glory of Jesus. Now, some in Philippi may have mistakenly assumed that Paul gained the glory of Jesus because Paul had reached spiritual perfection. Because that's kind of the way we think of Paul, isn't it? We think of Paul as a spiritual giant who was just almost perfect. And Paul never says that about himself. Matter of fact, he says just the opposite about himself. Remember, many of the Jewish Christians of the time thought and taught that spiritual perfection was attained by being circumcised and keeping the law. But this church family, this passage that we're going to talk about today deals a devastating blow to the false doctrine or false message of perfectionism. And you might be saying, well, why is that important to me, Tony? Why is it important to me that I know about perfectionism and what the Bible has to say about it? And it's important to you because that doctrine, whether it's called that doctrine or not, sometimes it's veiled as something else, is preached in churches today. And if you don't think it is, go into one of those churches and admit a big imperfection in your life and see what happens. You're going to find very little mercy, very little grace, very little forgiveness, very little compassion, and little to no Jesus. Paul, again, undoubtedly a spiritual giant, dedicated in every way to being a spiritually mature Christian, a dedicated spiritual follower of Jesus, confessed gladly that he had failed to reach spiritual perfection. This is 30 years after the road to Damascus, by the way. This is written about 30 years after the road to Damascus. In 30 years, Paul didn't get perfect? Man, what's his problem? What's Paul's problem? 30 years? Didn't get perfect. That confession, church, is more evidence to the truer statement or the truer nature of spiritual maturity. I'm not perfect. I'm far from perfect. Rather, to live in the fiction of perfectionism. Or, maybe worse than the fiction of perfectionism is, well, I'm better than most. As some do. You ever met a Christian or a follower of Jesus who by either words, actions, or attitude claim near perfection? And I bet you every one of you have. I bet you every one of you have. Near perfect Christians or near perfect followers of Jesus don't sin. They make mistakes, right? They mess up. But the truth is, church family, if you're ready for the truth, the Bible teaches that any violation of God's law, whether it is intended or not, is sin. No Christian will ever be perfect this side of heaven. Romans 3:23. Perfection in this life, it can be a goal, but it will never be an achievement. And it gets worse. Well, you say, well, how in the world can it get worse than that? Because if by words, actions, or attitude we say or we imply that we don't sin, that we are near perfect, God says we are a liar, and we make him a liar. 1 John 1:7-9. And that may not be the worst. Tony, there's something worse than that? There's something worse than making a liar out of God? Well, maybe. Because, church family, if by words, actions, or attitude we imply that we don't sin or we are near perfect or perfect is the standard, we turn people off. And we many times turn people off forever, never to be reached again. You know why we turn them off? Because they know who they are. They're honest about who they are. Unlike us sometimes, they are sinners. They know they have weaknesses. They know they can't do it themselves. They're people that need love and grace and mercy and compassion and forgiveness. They are exactly the people that Jesus wants. Yet sometimes we turn them off. I told you this wasn't going to be easy. I want to preference this by saying that you all are the most loving church family that I've been a part of. I've been a part of 3. By far, the most loving. People from Hurricane and Northside, all watching this, this is the most loving bunch. But we can do better. We can do better, church. There are many wonderful things about... I lost my mic. There are many wonderful things about being a member of the Church of Christ. Many wonderful things. You know, I used to play, I claim to be a golfer. I have golf clubs and I love to golf. That's the extent of my claim to be a golfer. But when we lived in Benton, I would golf often in Hot Springs Village. A lot of nice golf courses in Hot Springs Village. And at Hot Springs Village, they won't let a single person go most of the time. Or 2 people go most of the time. They want foursomes out there. So that means many times when you go to golf at Hot Springs Village, you're paired with somebody you do not know. And I've told you guys this before. There were 2 things that, you know, as you play with somebody, golf's a great social game. As you play golf with somebody, you get to talking to them, and they want to know what you do for a living. And I hated for them to find out that I was a minister. And you may say, that's goofy, Tony. No, it's not goofy. Because it changed the whole way that they acted around me once they found out I was a minister. They didn't throw a club. And then they would say, inevitably, well, where do you minister? And I would say, Northside Church of Christ. And then I would have to backpedal and say, but don't take that, because it would really change the way they acted after that. Like it or not, church family, and whether we're willing to admit it or not, and maybe you're not willing to admit it, I am. We have kind of an elitist reputation. And that elitist reputation that I don't find a lot in this church family anymore, but the reputation that we have nationwide, that reputation is killing us. Does anybody disagree with that? Our elitist reputation is killing us. And if you think I'm wrong about that, or if I'm overblowing it, or if I'm overselling it, I dare you to take this challenge. Ask 10 of your friends, and make sure they're not very good friends, because you might lose 1 or 2. Ask 10 of your friends their impression of the Church of Christ. And stand back and get ready for some hard truth. I bet most of you will not take that challenge because you already know what the result of it is going to be. So if some people have the impression that of perfection from me, that perfection, I somehow ooze, for lack of a better word, perfection. And perfection is what's expected from me. Where did they get that message? Did they get it from Jesus? Did they get it from Paul? Is there anything that we've studied about Paul that would make you think that? They got it from me. They got it from us, folks. And we must do better because there's a lot at stake. We'll have to do better if we're going to lead people to Jesus. I've always found, not always, because that would not be true. I have found that in ministry, I'm much more effective as a minister the more I'm willing to admit my shortcomings, the more I'm willing to admit my mistakes, my sins, the things in my life that have not gone well. I see that people respond to that better. Why? Because they have shortcomings, they have weaknesses, and they have things in their life that are not going well. There's very few people that you're going to run into out there. Now, they may tell you at first everything is fine, because that's what we do, isn't it? We put on our okay mask. I'm okay, you're okay. We put on that mask, and we have superficial interaction with each other instead of really getting down to what matters. It's not easy to put yourself out there, put your weaknesses out there, put the tragedies that have happened in your life out there, put things out there that maybe you don't even want people to know. But I will tell you this, it will make you a more effective minister. It just will. It just will. We're going to come back to that in a little bit. I'm going to read 12 through 16 again. Not that I've already attained this, and he's talking about attaining the resurrection from the dead, or I've already arrived at my goal, but I press on to take hold of that which Christ Jesus took hold of for me. Brothers and sisters, I do not consider myself yet to have taken hold of it, but one thing I do, forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead, I press to the goal to win the prize, for God has called me heavenward in Jesus Christ. All of us then who are mature should take such a view of things. And at some point, if you think differently, that God will make it clear to you. Only let us live up to what we have already attained. Paul is straining forward. Verse 14 describes his motivation for straining or running forward with great effort. He wants to possess the prize. He wants to press toward the goal that God has called him heavenward, his words, in Jesus. He looks forward to this future hope. Christians must keep their eye on heaven. They must. If you're not keeping your eye on heaven, I don't know how you're getting along in this world. If you're not keeping your eyes on heaven, you need to start. Maybe that needs to be your 2022 resolution. I'm going to start looking more at the prize. I'm going to start looking more at the finish line. I'm going to start looking more at the end game. But church family, as I mature as a Christian, hopefully I'm maturing, and as a Jesus follower, I think less about the heaven that God is wiping away all the tears. And I think less about the heaven of walking streets of gold. I'm not a big fan of walking anyway. I think less about the heaven of the mansion on the hilltop or riding on the clouds or eating great food. Because I'm with Paul. The reason I'm pressing toward heaven and pressing forward is that prize of knowing Jesus fully. Knowing Jesus is the goal, church family. The prize is Jesus Christ. The prize is eternity with Jesus. You know, what made the Garden of Eden paradise in Genesis 3? What, was it the beautiful landscape? Well, I imagine it was pretty. Was it amazing animals that Adam got to name? Well, that'd been pretty cool. I'd have probably went up with a few different names than he did. Was it the red delicious apples? No. What made the Garden of Eden paradise, church, was God was there. God was there unhindered. God was there unmatched in his access. Man's access to God and God's access to man. That's what made Eden paradise. That's the prize. That's the goal. That kind of access. That kind of relationship with God. Heaven is knowing Jesus. Heaven is being with God. Heaven is seeing Him like He really is. 1 John 3:2. Heaven is the elation of being in the presence of God 24/7. Verse 15 says, all of us then who are mature should take such a view of things. This is the way, or one of the ways, I guess, that we measure how mature a follower of Jesus we are. I think mature followers of Jesus think a lot about what they're doing here, why God put them here, why God put them in the middle of the circle that they're in. We talk about circles, the circle of your family, the circle of your friends, the circle of your coworkers or your schoolmates. Why are you in that circle? We think about knowing Jesus. We think about being Jesus. And we think about pursuing Jesus. The mature follower of Jesus understands that they've not earned this amazing gift. The mature follower of Jesus recognizes that they are not perfect and are willing to admit it. Matter of fact, the more you admit it, I think the more effective follower of Jesus you will be. Sounds counterintuitive, sounds crazy, but it is the truth. Paul spends much of his time telling you just how weak he is. He's the chief of sinners. The Apostle Paul calls himself the chief of sinners. It's not helpful to give others the impression that we are almost perfect, that there's nothing wrong going on in our lives. It seems like, how many of you are on Facebook? Man, there's some good lives out there, ain't there? People are living it up. Man, yeah, I thought 2020 and 2021 were tough years. If you think they were, just go on Facebook. There's a lot of people just doing great. That's a facade. That's not reality. The fact is, everyone's hurting. We all hurt in different ways. And the more that we share the ways that we're hurting, the more opportunities it's going to give us to help each other and help the people in that circle. The more opportunities that we take to share our imperfection, the more opportunities it's going to give us to be Jesus Christ in that circle. And maybe even make your circle bigger. The mature follower of Jesus has the same attitude that Paul had regarding this spiritual foot race that we're all in. Love, forgive, be compassionate, be humble, serve. Because it's one big race, folks. Think about it. Go ahead and flip a slide. This is the best I could come up with. And don't get any impression from this that I'm a runner, okay? But this is what I see a bunch of Jesus followers pursuing the goal. That's the way I see our church family pursuing the goal. Treat the runner beside you like Jesus would. Treat the runner behind you like Jesus would. Treat the runner in front of you like Jesus would. I've been so blessed to be around some great spiritual runners in my time, and they have helped me immensely. I think back to Hurricane, a guy named Paul Salon. He was an older gentleman. And during a rough time at the Hurricane Church of Christ, he stood by me. He was much older than I, much more wise. And I think about people at Northside that ran beside of me when I was there. And I think about y'all. I think about Miss Betty. I think about Miss Brock. I think about this eldership who's been so good to me and have ran beside of me. Run to Jesus. There's a song I used to know. I seem to forget more things than I remember anymore, but there was a song called Run to Jesus. Run to Jesus. And while you're running to Jesus, help everybody that's around you run to Jesus too. That's the message today. If you're here and you need help with that, if maybe you quit running, maybe you're running the wrong way. This is a bunch of really imperfect people. I hate to burst your bubble, but it's a bunch of really imperfect people, and Captain Imperfect is standing in front of you. But we'd love to help you. We'd love to pray with you and help you any way that we could, whether that's a physical, spiritual, mental health issue, whatever that need is. Come as we stand and sing.
Close this morning with Beautiful. We'll sing the first and third verse and then have our closing prayer. Beautiful road so wide, beautiful land of light, beautiful home so bright, where there shall come no night, beautiful crown I'll wear, shining and bright o'er there, yonder in mansions fair, gather us there.
Let's pray. Father in heaven, I thank you for this day that you given to us today, that we can wake up again and just come together as a church family and study your word and sing songs to you. Lord, I pray for the sick in our congregation and that you bring them back to their much wanted health. And I pray for the men and women fighting overseas and anywhere else for our freedom and how they keep us safe. I ask that you keep them safe and bring them back to their families and loved ones. And Lord, I ask that you be with us as we go from here and bring us back. And thank you for your son, Jesus, and it's through him I pray, amen.